what we're doing today is there's an initiation happening in Austin, Texas, with a bunch of members of the nation. Hey, you guys, just shout out, just give a big wave to the audience because they're going to watch this later. There you go. And see, that's a call and response. And what we thought we would do is a live version of the Elder Council. And Dewey Freeman, my cohort here, is in Austin with the guys. And what we thought we'd do is just take live questions because we've never done that before. We typically will just come up with whatever the fuck we want to talk about on any given Saturday morning. And we thought we would just listen to you guys. And but first off, Dewey, how's the last 3 days been?
It's been over the top wonderful. Every person here has dived in. It's been incredibly intense. We've been hanging with each other. We've been playing with horses. We've been, everybody's given their heart and soul to virtually everything we've been doing. So I could not ask for more.
Nice. I look forward to joining in August at the one in Colorado, Jefferson.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Before we jump in too far, Mark, would you introduce yourself just a little bit? We've been hyping you up and
Jesus,
cussing and discussing you, and I keep telling everybody how humble you are, which is absolutely true. So I'm going to ask you to step out of that a little bit and introduce yourself a little bit.
I was born a poor black child in Tupelo, Mississippi.
You had to walk to school each way uphill, 4 feet of snow.
Wearing a mask. No, so my name's Mark. I'm calling to you from Santa Barbara, California. I've lived here since 1972, raised 2 amazing kids, got 3 amazing grandkids. Started my career as a chef here in Santa Barbara, built 5 restaurants. I love cooking. I love community. I love the whole idea of creating something from nothing, which is what I do. And ironically, 50 years later, I'm still cooking twice a week for a bunch of families that started when COVID shut down everything, and I was able to cook, and they like the food, so I continue to do it. And I love the creative process. When I stopped cooking, when I was 30 years old, I started a computer animation software company when computer animation software wasn't a thing yet, and was part of the revolution that brought computer graphics to motion pictures and television, video games, industrial design, architecture. Won 4 scientific and technical achievement awards from the Motion Picture Academy, including an Oscar for software that we developed here in Santa Barbara called Maya. So if any of you have ever had anything to do with animation at all, the word Maya will ring a bell for you. And that was me and my team here in Santa Barbara. I've been going to, as a result of that got me invited to the TED conference 28 years ago to show off the stuff that we had been working on and the innovations we were doing around digital humans and digital twins and virtual, all that kind of stuff. That got me to meet some of the most amazing people I'd ever met in my life. And 12 years ago, we started a TEDx here in Santa Barbara, X over my shoulder, called TEDx. TEDx Santa Barbara had live events. Traver was on our stage twice. When COVID hit, we had to pivot to a virtual representation to stay in touch with our audience. And next week will be my 99th show that we've done every Wednesday in a row, talking about things that are important. So I think the thing to know the most about me is that I believe that one of the most important skills you can cultivate yourself is critical thinking. And critical thinking comes down to, I think it's pretty simple. It's thinking of, asking and preparing questions in your life, asking questions. I was just talking with an educator 2 days ago who said that the role of the educator is to provoke the student to ask questions of their own while they are consuming the content. And I had never really heard it put that way. And I think that that's what I've done my whole life is Dewey knows this. I always have a piece of paper right here where I'm writing down questions. And the trick is to be able to write the question and stay present in the conversation the whole time, which it's taken a while to figure out how to do that. But Dewey, how was that? Was that less humble than usual?
That was perfect.
Great.
So and thank you very much. And just so everybody knows, that's about 1/10 of what you have accomplished and do in your life. And I'm incredibly appreciative that you're here today. So as a beginning, I have a question for you, and then maybe we can open this up to folks. You and I have been working together through, we have what, 33, 34 shows, something like that.
Who's counting?
And as the elder council for UNcivilized, from inside you, what is being an elder mean to you?
So there are archetypes in life, and I know that Traver talks about this, you talk about this. It's kind of a known thing, the various archetypes we go through life, and I happen to be in the one that and you and I both are in the one they call sage, which is the one just before mystic. God knows what's going to happen when that one happens to me, but
that's when we make more shit.
Well, that's when I start fucking levitating. I think right now I feel like I'm living into my Obi-Wan Kenobi-ness, and I love that. I love that. I feel there's a responsibility, actually. It's a responsibility to turn the lessons outward and to and help as many people as possible just by being. I don't think of I know I'm an elder in the elder council, but I think of myself, I self-identify as a Sherpa. And to me, a Sherpa is one who's been along that same road, that mountainous path, 1,000 times, and knows that right up around the bend, you're going to hit the wall, and has already placed some oxygen bottles there for you, knows that that's going to happen, but is carrying a pack with you as you're going. And that's how I look at it. I don't feel like I've achieved a specific place where I can pontificate about those things. Like, I'm still going through this shit on a daily basis myself, and you and I talk about that on the show. And I think that I feel there's a responsibility to share it with people who, at least while they may not act on it, we're planting seeds that suggest these things are going to happen to you. Straight up. We just know they're going to happen. And here's how we dealt with it. And guess what? We're still alive. We made it. We're happy. We're loving life. So you will, even though when you're in the worst you feel like you could ever be, and I don't know how it's ever going to get better. It does get better. And so I think as an elder, there's a responsibility to go out and spread that message, to at least to people who will listen. If they don't listen, that's fine. Move on. There's people who will. What's it
Right
mean to
on.
you? What's it mean to you, Dewey?
I'd piggyback on what you said, and in addition to that, I would. I was out working. We have horses here that we worked with yesterday, and I was out just playing with one of them this morning, and I became aware that what I know about horses is in my bones.
Mhm,
It's no longer an intellectual process,
mhm.
and that through my life, I've been able to learn things that I hold in my bones and in my heart and my soul. And that I agree with you in regard to the responsibility. My responsibility is to share as much as I can from my heart, my soul, and what's in my bones. Hopefully, so that other people don't have to go through maybe not quite as tough a time as I had to go through to get whatever they get to. If I can give somebody a leg up, that to me is incredibly valuable. So sharing who I am and what I am and my experience from the inside out is a piece of what elder means to me. The other piece has to do with not only holding myself responsible, but holding younger men responsible for finding this themselves. And both asking and on some levels insisting that people look at themselves from the inside out and do their work. So in 30, 40, 20, 10 years, they can be sitting here doing this.
In addition to that, I think that we can't make people do stuff they're not going to want to do. Like come on, you can lead a horse to water, right? There you go. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make them.
I don't know anything.
Yeah, well, it's the only horse metaphor I know. So we'll stay with that. I live in a beach town. Come on.
So there's some water there.
What I hope I've learned is how to communicate these important life lessons in a way that people will pay attention. So it's not about pontificating. It's like knowing your audience. It's about wrapping everything in a story. Otherwise, it's just exhale only. It's, oh, that old guy won't shut the fuck up. That doesn't work. That doesn't do it. So that's why this idea of really mastering communication. In fact, try to think of yourself and live into being a gifted communicator. And once you have figured that part out, then you don't have to make anybody do anything. You'll be able to master influence over other people, in the sense that if all I want them to do, my intention is I want you to hear what I have to say, weigh it against your common sense, and decide, yep, I'm going to do that, or I don't think that's going to work for me. If I can just get that. So at the end of this, I can say, did I change your mind, or did I get you to think about that thing in a different way? And if we do that, then I think you and I as elders have increased the odds that the seeds we sow aren't going to fall on fallow ground. Wow, I got 4 metaphors in there today, Dewey.
Yeah, that was pretty good. I'm in agreement with all of that. The one piece I would add to that. So, well, first of all, a lot of times we talk about both and, not either or.
Right.
So I just want to put that piece out. The other, and a piece I would add to that, is that a way. There are many, many, many ways to communicate.
Thousands.
Many times people think communication has to do with what we say. About a huge amount of what we communicate is through our energy, how we live, and what we do.
Yep.
So
You reminded me of quote. Thankfully, I learned most of the really big lessons when I was really young, and so I was able to have those kind of in my toolkit, if you will, right? You know, getting divorced when you're 20 years old is that'll kick your ass, and you'll learn some lessons from that. But to your point, Jim Collins famously said, "It is the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or."
So what I'm going to do, because all I can see is just little bits of folks on the screen. Michael and Traver, would you sort of monitor the questions or?
Absolutely. Robert, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up as far as the discussion of eldership and moving between teaching, mentorship, and eldership, if that makes sense, and how that process may have worked for you, and how we, as various ages, can move from teaching into mentorship and then eventually into eldership.
You might have to repeat that for Mark.
No, I got it.
Could you hear that, Mark?
That was Robert. Hey, Robert, how you doing, buddy? I know that voice. I'm going to take the middle one first, the mentorship. I just wrote a piece on reverse mentoring that'll get published next month. And reverse mentoring is mentorship typically is thought as a one-way deal. You go get a mentor and then you have that mentoring relationship. And I look at it that way, and I look at it like that person I'm mentoring doesn't know it, but I'm getting some mentoring from them, and I just call it reverse mentoring. And I had a group of at-risk high school kids 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in an after-school program here in Santa Barbara. And in writing this story about teaching them computer animation, mentoring them around how to work in a team environment. And I hadn't gotten to elder status at that time. What I found out, because I was trying to fact check some of the stuff, I found one of the kids who was in that program, found him this week on Facebook. And we had a long conversation, and he said it was as a result of being in that program and learning how to mentor the next group of kids, because he'd never done that. He'd never. Hello.
There we go.
There you go.
We lost audio for a second there. Please repeat. As a result of being in that program is where
we had half a dozen at-risk kids would work on an animation project all semester, and then they would graduate and become the mentors for the next group of kids to give them that experience. And so they'd never been treated as leaders. They'd never been given that respect. And this young man, AJ, I talked to him this week, and he said what he fell in love with in that program was mentoring and helping others. He'd never had that experience. He now is a teacher at Santa Barbara High School. He left our program, went and got a teaching degree, went back to the program, and became a teacher. You guys, I was full on crying. I couldn't let him see that. I mean, I guess I could have, but knowing you had that impact was so important. So I think teaching is exhale only. Typically, you're teaching and there's some feedback. Hey, did they get it? They get it. I'm reading the room. Mentoring to me is it's a very specific relationship with one person, where you have put that person's path, take it to me. I feel responsible for helping that person along their path, and I'm kind of the guardrails on either side of the bumper pool, if you will, of helping them, kind of make the right decisions and just be there for them so they know I'm there. I think eldership is I think you earn something with that. I'm going to go back to Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Yoda even. They say stuff and people pay attention. I don't know if it's the gray hair or the gravitas that comes with eldership, but there's something to that. And as a result, I feel personally for me, like people are listening. So I better take that very, very, add another very seriously, because I know, just like AJ, there was something that happened that changed the course of his life. And I know that there's something that'll be said today, something that will have been said in these 4 days that you guys are together, that will change your life. As an elder, that responsibility is, it's a big deal.
Right on. Everybody breathe, please. Everyone take a breath. Part of the responsibility that you're talking about, Mark, and I deeply appreciate you speaking from your heart, which you do all the time, every time we speak, is for me knowing that I only have a certain amount of time left. And that maybe the 20 years that I have left is going to be a different 20 years than the last 20 years, the 20 years before that, to 20 years before that. I agree with you around mentoring, and there's a shift at some place, and there was a shift for me in there at some place of getting that every minute that I spend is a minute that I'll never see again. Every minute that I spend is a minute that I want to be valuable to me, and more importantly, to someone else. Because that someone else is what's going, that whomever that may be, whether it be the little horse that I was working with this morning, whether that is my partner, whether that are my brothers, that they're the ones that's going to carry that on. Because the chances of me being here 30 years from now are pretty minimal. The chances of me being here 20 years from now, I think they're pretty good. And I do anticipate there'll be a time in there where I'll be less able to move, to do certain things. But the eldership piece to me is entwined with everything that you've said, has to do with that I know that this is the last leg of my life. And I don't want
last one, best one, buddy.
Yet no, we're in agreement. I absolutely love my life. I know that I could retire, and I don't, because of what I just said around the deep desire to pass on and for people to be influenced. And I loved what you talked about around the influence. We put stuff out and we may or may not influence somebody.
What's interesting is the inadvertent, let's call it unconscious influence, right? We've talked about consciousness and all of that. It's the unconscious influence. I did not know AJ's story until he told me that.
Right.
And what was interesting about that specific after school program for at-risk kids was I said, listen, I'm not your boss. I'm not your dad. I'm not your friend. I'm not an authority figure. I'm another adult in your life who wants you to be successful. Okay, that's what I want. And I knew, because I'm very in touch with my inner teenager, that they distrusted everything, and that we had to show up and model behavior that we around collaboration and working in a team and being good communicators and all that stuff. So I just wanted to model all that all the time. Didn't matter what I said, because I'm just like some talking adult. So I had to model it. And to hear someone 30 years later who went back to teaching because he loved working and mentoring, it hit me. There have been probably 8,000 or 9,000 kids that have gone through his program that he's impacted in his life. Like that's a big deal. And that's just one guy. How many guys in our lives, how many people in our lives have we unconsciously influenced, positively or negatively? We say one thing and then they look at us and they go, fuck, look at that guy. And though that's how he reacts under stress. Right.
Right on. Right on. Thank you.
Do we have another question from the crowd?
Everyone breathe.
Everyone breathe. I want to breathe.
Yeah, let's go for that.
Chris, your hand.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mark, Dewey. My name's Chris, and the question really revolves around scale. What you guys are doing here is nothing short of remarkable. And 100 million men in this country need this. How do you scale up the intimacy, the vulnerability, this weekend, 4 days, I don't know how you can replicate this in a scale up form. So you being the businessman, Dewey being who Dewey is, how do you do this? Because this needs to be on a different level.
Want to hit that first, Mark?
That's what Traver and I talk about all the time, right, T?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's what he's doing. And it starts by, in any movement starts really small by doing this kind of thing. Hopefully you all are going to go back and be influenced by this and the programs that I know that T's put in place to have, groups that are run by leaders, and they have groups and they do leaders, and that's how this thing works. It's not going to work through mass advertising or mass anything anymore. This is a groundswell movement. And that's how it's got to work. I don't think you can manufacture this kind of intimacy, this kind of event. This is an experience. It's called an initiation for a very, very specific purpose. And some stuff in life just doesn't come easy. You've got to grind through it like you guys are doing, and as Dewey and I have done in through our lives. You have to take the time. So you've got to find people who understand the importance, will make the investment. You don't have to do this every week, but on some regular basis, unplugging from everything else and leaning into yourself with the support of a bunch of other humans around you, led by leaders who have your back. That's just part of being an involved human. So how do you scale that? You know, we probably have to do probably an initiation a month and get, you know, 30 people a month out there, and those people do 30, and you just do the math, and it starts to work. That would be my answer. And I know Trevor's on the road to doing that.
So one of the things that I appreciate about what Traver does is Traver is fully willing to support all of the men in his group, nation. I also know that he supports other men's leaders.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest pieces that I have seen that causes failure to expand is competition where competition isn't needed to be.
Right.
It just messes things up.
Right.
It doesn't mean that each person that there may be some level of push for ourselves to be better. And at the same time, walking in and going, yeah, here's Man Uncivilized. And I also know, for instance, that Traver supports Connor Beaton and Connor supports Traver. So each of them, for instance, come in different doors. And at the same time, there's that support there instead of the competition. Doing one of these a month is
Grueling.
I do think that's needed. Well, it's grueling and it's needed.
Yeah, 100%, which is why you need to get the training. And I think we, you know, a couple things, you know, one way to scale is to have a book. And, you know, Traver, I was there during that whole time of him knowing how important that was and carving out the time to be able to do that. We carve out the time to be able to do this show. We know we're turning the show into a book. So all of this stuff will be captured and we can scale that way. One of the things that crossed my mind as you were saying that, Dewey, was around the word competition. And I'm a big fan of the word collaboration and co-creating things. And I think that this will work when it's co-created amongst a bunch of people that are on a bunch of groups that are on the same page. I think the thing to look out for is the competition. Typically, the root of that has financial underpinnings. And if someone says, gee, if I promote his group, they're gonna the financial resources are gonna go his way and not my way. And so that's always going to be a challenge. You know, the money part of it's always going to be a challenge. So I think if we're kind of all aware of that and do this for the right reason, which is because we want to help men and it's not about, you know, fattening the purse.
Exactly. And one of the other pieces that I would add to that, and is that Chris is a doctor. And so put together a group of 30 doctors. Let's do this with them.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Let's start putting this out.
Yeah.
Depth will come over time.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about, I think in our first few shows, we talked about creating openings and how you build relationships and how you build it one brick at a time. And it's one shared experience at a time. None of it, you know, sorry, but none of it comes easy. It's not like it's hard. It takes time to, you know, build these structures, these really strong foundations that we can build our families on and we can build our businesses on, and we can build our communities on. And it takes it doesn't take a lot of leaders, but it does take leaders to do that. You know, and you lead in your own life, which extends to your family, which extends to your community and your community writ large. And it's I think assuming the mantle of leadership and not shrinking away from that. Like, hey, I'm a leader. People look to me. I need to lead in very authentically. And as a leader, I need to be recharging myself as well. So, you know, Traverse heard me say this many, many times. Every coach needs a coach, right? So I have a coach, you have a coach. This is a room of coaches, I'm hoping, who are going to go back out, and this is a coaching session here, being coached by a coach. So I think I am 100% convinced that you can change everything with one person, with one talk on one day. I've just seen it happen over and over and over in my life. Being involved in the TED community, one TED talk changes everything. How many of us have seen the Simon Sinek's talk? You know, 56 million people or some stupid number like that. That's one guy on one day in Puget Sound. But guess what? He consistently talks and continues to talk and continues to lead and continues to do things. So you know that there's substance there.
Absolutely. And I would suggest going a step further. One of the men at breakfast today asked me, he literally said, so we're all going through this. What do you do? What do you do for yourself, Dewey? And I don't know that I answered that as fully as I wanted to answer it.
When would now be
I
a
do
good
take
time
care
to
of
answer that
myself.
question?
Well, the other thing is the 3 days before I came here, I was in a 3-day workshop with my mentor all day long, and I got my ass kicked. And I did that purposely before I came here. So literally Friday, Saturday, Sunday, from 9 to 5:30, those 3 days. I came home Sunday night, packed my stuff, got on a plane, came down here on Monday. The biggest way to keep that going and here's where I see leadership. I agree with you on the money piece. The piece, though, that I see as the most destructive piece is when our egos get in the way.
100%.
And where we don't allow ourselves, where it's like, okay, I'm going to win at all costs, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. That process of going and doing what we're asking other people to do and doing that consistently is incredibly important. I spend on average 25 to 28 days a year in doing my own work in workshops and intensives, where I'm the not leading, I'm the student.
We had talked, we did one show on that exact thing, where if we have a coin, on one side of the coin is being a teacher, the other side of that same coin is being a student. And someone who is a really good teacher is, in my belief, a really good student, and someone who's a really good student will eventually become a really good teacher. But if you don't have that coin in your pocket, you're neither a good teacher or a good student, right? And that's just not everybody can do that. Not everybody is that. There's another point of view that I've had for, oof, I think 40 years, which is, can I be 1% better today than I was yesterday? And it's a challenge I give myself. And I'm kind of always looking for what's that 1% is like. Anybody can be 1% better, like literally anybody can. But can you be cognizant of, hey, what's that 1% going to be today? Like, what's the thing I'm going to be a little better at today? Yesterday, it was leaning into being better prepared for a high stakes meeting I was going into. And I thought, I'm really prepared. I have all of my stuff all lined up. And I thought, how could I make it a little better? I could make it a little better if I organized it and I thought about how the material was going to be delivered in what order so that things stacked really nicely. Normally, I would have I go into stuff really prepared, as you would assume I do. But that was my 1% better yesterday. Think about how that is going to be received and then do that. And then at the end of the day, think, hey, what was my 1% today?
Does that mean I have to live to 100 to get to 100%?
No, you only have to live 100 days.
Oh, God.
That's math. That's math, Dewey. You're a physicist. Come on.
So the other piece that I want to add into that is when we lead, when we are mentors or we're elders, that we cannot lead anybody past where we have gone ourselves. If we want to help somebody get to someplace, wherever that happens to be, we have to have gone there in some way or another for ourselves.
I'm going to yes and you now, because I think about life as a series of plateaus. And I get to a plateau, and then we're on that plateau. And if I'm further along that path than you are, I can come back and help, and I can lead you because I've been along that path, to your point. But I'm going to come to the next mountain and go up that mountain, and it's at that point where I'm going into something that I've not done, so I can't lead. So I then assume the role of fellow traveler.
I think that can happen. And when that happens, our role shifts.
Yeah.
Which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about over this last few days about fluidity. And we need to be able to be fluid enough to go, oh, I'm shifting roles here.
And know that you have the tools, you have the experience, so that where a new situation that you've not encountered before is going to come up, and you're like, I've not had to deal with this one before. Have trust yourself that you have the tools, and if you don't, you'll figure out how to put together the tools. I have a very, very, very strong sense of my ability to succeed in any situation that I've just had my whole life. I just, even though it is going to be fucking rough and I do not know what I'm going to do, I have a very deep-seated trust in my own ability. If I get out of my own way and just, hey, dude, you'll figure it out. You always do. It's going to feel like you can't, but you always do. And I think that trust thank God I've got that. When I hear that people don't have that, I feel sad, and I want to, but I don't know how to inculcate that in someone else. And I thank God I have that.
Right. So another question.
Let's do it. Orange right
Hey,
behind you.
I heard you touch. Yeah, I heard you touch on the importance of doing the things that you say. And I wanted to hear you guys expand on the importance of integrity in this work.
I don't know about Michael, but I know Dewey, Traver, and I are martial artists. In my martial art in Hapkido, there are 5 tenets we live by: courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. And when I got my black belt when I was 50, and I got introduced to that way, a martial way of life at that point. And I live a martial life in that way. And I strive to lead a martial life. And I know in the first 10 years, my wife and I challenged each other on those tenets. And I challenged my kids on those tenets because they're so important. And we'll say, oh, so that's what perseverance looks like, huh? Knowing we're not being perseverant. Or my wife would say, we could work on courtesy right now, couldn't we? It gave us a language.
I could just see Kimberly saying that.
Yeah.
Actually, everyone knows Mark has a Kimberly and I have a Kimberly. So they're 2 different people.
When you have a shared language and permission to given each other permission to hold each other accountable, that makes it achievable that you will get to those things. In terms of integrity, it's one of the ways to think about it is that there's always a camera on you. Now, literally in life, there's probably a camera recording what you did, or a microphone recording what you did. And just know that in Dewey and I call it the watcher, right? There's a watcher. Imagine if you had a board of directors, if you've ever reported to a board of directors, there's a board of directors watching you do what you do. And just think about that. There's someone watching you. That's a great way to stay in integrity. Oh God, would I want someone to know what I'm doing right now? And if the answer is no, then don't do it.
For me, and I ask many people to do this, is to write a set of values by which they live. And I often ask people to do a minimum of 10. And over a period of time, a lot of times people will start off and write 47. Many times they can be condensed to 10. And what I find is that a lot of people do not have a set of values that they have put together for themselves. Many times they have a belief system that they have read, someone else has told them, those kinds of things. But sitting down and actually writing a list of values by which they will live their life, and then being congruent with those values. And so, as an example, one of the things that I believe is that we've talked about the difference between power and control this last couple of days. Is that one of my values is to live in power and not control. An underlying value of that has to do with living and making contact with myself and others. And we haven't gone through that much. I think we're going to do more of that today. when I work with my own set of values, I hold myself to that as closely as possible 100% of the time. And the other piece that I think that, interestingly enough, that actually holds us in integrity is the ability to forgive ourselves when we blow it. Because if there's any rule around any of that, the only rule that's always true is that we will fucking blow it.
We'll fuck up.
Period. So one of my values is around self-forgiveness.
There's I'm gonna add a little thing to that, because I saw everybody writing that down, and two things I love about that is, while you can be inspired by values you've heard or read or talked about, I mean, I just talked about 5: courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. But coming up with your own makes it your own. I love that a lot. But I'd love to reframe the terminology, and this is something I learned years ago in my software company. We went through the same exact exercise. Said, there's no values in your company. You guys don't stand for anything. Like, what the fuck? I mean, come on, you don't have that. You need that. And so we made our own list of things, because we're very rebellious and we didn't want anybody telling us what to do. We said, we're going to make our own values. Okay. And then I said, and we're not going to print them and put them at the front door and everybody goes, this is our values. That we're going to internalize these. To your point, we said very early, integrate this stuff in your bones. But here was the thing that changed everything for us. We called them observable behaviors. And we said, it's not enough to have a value. We want to be able to see the value in action. So at the end of every week, the 6 of us would get together, and all week long, we would have been on the lookout for people who exhibited those values in observable behaviors. And then we would keep track of that. And we started measuring the culture of the company by what we could observe. And that it changed everything for us. And I still, to this day, when I hear about a value, it's like, okay, great. What's that value look like? Give me an example of that value in practice, and then I'll believe that you'll be able to do it.
So I love that. And the only thing I worry about with that is the process whereby we would start living by other people's judgments of us. And
Okay, so let's test that for a second. So one of my favorite ones was act like you own the company. Okay, so give me an example of someone who acted like they owned the company. And now give me an example of when they didn't act like they owned the company, and they had permission, because that's one of our core values. So they had permission to do that, but they didn't step into it. How did you as a leader coach them and give them permission and say, hey, there was a time you knew we were making a bad decision, and if it was your company, you would have stepped in and said this. So I think there's an opportunity to coach when you say, hey, one of our values is act like you own the company, and there was an opportunity for you to do that and you didn't take it. You have permission to do that. It's important that we all if you were the boss, if you were the owner, it was your money, you wouldn't let that shit happen. You wouldn't walk by that piece of trash. You would pick it up. I'm not sure what our time is like. I'm good for one more question, or do we need to wrap it?
I don't know.
We're good for one more question, Mark, if you have the space for it.
Yeah,
I'm
let's do one
good.
more question.
Bobsy.
So my question is, what piece of advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
Tune in on Saturdays. I think that there's a lot of them, but I think the biggest one is become an active listener.
That would be your advice.
I mean, there's
One
a
of the
lot,
key-
there's a lot, but I think it wasn't until I understood that there was a thing called active listening, and active listening implies that you're being present and you're working at listening. You're not just listening. I'm actively listening. Like, if you can figure that out now, that's a big one. That'll help on all the other ones.
Yeah, big time.
What's yours, Dewey?
One of the greatest compliments that I've ever received is
Mm.
when I've been told that I am essentially the same regardless of what situation I'm in. So I don't put on a therapy hat and then put on a cowboy hat and be a horseman, then put on a husband hat, then put on a friend hat. My goal every day is to be congruent throughout my life. And so my piece of advice would be to work toward congruency every minute of your day.
I love it. Hey,
Yes, yeah.
Traver, thank you so much for inviting us.
We do love.
Or can you do one more quick one? You have
Of course, I got all kinds of time.
Josh, you want to?
All right, one more time.
Hey, Mark, my name's Josh, and I know we're going to cover this tomorrow, but I'm just curious as how did you stay uncivilized in a civilized world?
Wow. I should write a book. I'm of a generation that one of our mantras growing up was don't trust anybody over 30. And now I'm of an age that I don't trust anybody under 30. I'm from a generation that just was very skeptical. By the way, Dewey, I just learned that skeptic came from the Greeks and that there was a group of people that were called skeptics. I had no idea what skeptics were. And now my eyes were opened. That's why another piece of advice to the 25-year-old self is spend 30% of your time reading and learning and studying. 30%. That's a big chunk of time. Spend it reading, studying, learning, whatever that means to you, do that. And I do that to this day, which is how I learned about skeptics. And it's like, huh? But I think the thing that has made me how I live into this life is just questioning everything and then being that authentic and being congruent. When you get burned enough, you've got a bunch of scars. You go through these events like this where you just it's the chalice, the fire, it's the burning off the stuff, burning off with the wheat and the chaff and all that. I can't mix any more metaphors, Dewey. I'm sorry. But there's something about living through those wounds and all of that stuff, knowing that that's making you stronger and stronger, and just having a really strong sense of self Don't know where I got that. I'm glad I have it. I think it's genetic because I see it in my son. I see it in my grandkids. I think it's something that I got from my father, my grandfather. So thank God I got that from them. And so I think that's where that comes from. It's just figuring out how to be big enough, but not too big that you're oppressive. If that makes sense. Hope that answered, Josh.
I get it, Josh.
Yes, thank you.
My response to that is to stay uncivilized. The only way I know how to do that is to never give up my own authenticity to try to attach.
Yep.
That authenticity and attachment go together. If I give up my authenticity to try to attach and connect, that will be a pseudo or false attachment anyway.
Yeah.
And to know that if I don't give up my authenticity, I may or may not be able to attach in certain situations.
Yeah.
And that authenticity does feed into exactly what you spoke about, Mark, of going through a really tough time and coming out okay, and doing that over and over and over and over, and knowing that that's what life is about.
I love that part. Now, the trick is have fun while you're doing it and laugh and give yourself permission to play.
Right on.
Hey guys, this has
Thank
been
you,
fantastic and I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing some of you in late August and just hang in there. This is the good stuff what you guys are doing. Traver, thank you so much for allowing us to do our show here today. Thanks, guys. Whoa, we're getting a standing O, do we? Wow. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Tyler.
Same way we sign off every week. I love you.
I love you too, my friend. Love all you guys. Bye-bye.